Good evening, I'm Jason Vio. Meg is off. This is CBC Windsor News at 6. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Discarded needles can be dangerous as they're not easy to see, but some in Windsor are calling on the feds to make a change to fix the problem. As temperatures around the world get warmer, the Ontario government is looking to add measures to protect people who work in the heat. And a green bin program is coming by 2024. We check in ahead of that big change. The effects of the opioid crisis in Windsor can be seen in city parks. Discarded needles littering places where kids play. They can be hard to spot and hazardous for people in public spaces and for those tasked with cleaning them up. As the CBC's Lamia Abuzaid reports, there's a push for change at the highest levels.
This is what MP Brian Massey wants to see changed. Hard to see needles that can cause harm to someone who might come across a used one in public. The suggestion is that needles that are used to inject drugs should be made with colors that are easier to spot. Massey says he has seen the risk up close.
All it takes is one person to get pricked during the process of doing cleanups. And if they're in the weeds or if they're in other types of debris, it's quite easy. And so I've been out there with youth groups in my past, and as well, even as a councillor and as an MP, we did a cleanup of a famous place in West Windsor called The Cut, and of course we run across needles. In fact, having needle containment systems are part of the normal equipment that you need for cleanups on sites. So again, this is, having a marking on the needle itself is very helpful for those volunteers because we don't want anybody injured ever during a cleanup.
Alex Song is a community developer with the Downtown Windsor Community Collaborative. Song says he's in favor of marked needles so kids playing at parks can identify it, but there's something else he's hoping for.
I think the yellow bins need to be more accessible. There need to be more of them, especially in the parks downtown in certain areas where unfortunately there is known to be more kind of unwanted behavior around drug use and needle use. Definitely need them in the parks so that if people or have them or intravenous users are using them, at least they have an option to put it in a safe place.
One advocate says this initiative is a small solution to a bigger problem.
I would love to have a little bit more attention put towards is why are we finding so many discarded needles in public places? Where are they being located? And how can we maybe offer better supports for the neighbors who are finding them, for the people who are leaving them, and just a little bit more advocacy around the education and information that could better support that.
Brian Massey is not expecting a quick response. He says this is because Mark Holland was appointed the Minister of Health about 2 weeks ago, but he hopes to hear back from him soon. Lamia Abuzaid, CBC News, Windsor.
This is a live look inside the Windsor City Hall Council chambers right now. A lot of eyes watching what is going on right now. And we've told you about the push to save the Roseland Curling Club by members this past year. Well, Council is debating multiple options right now and hearing firsthand from curlers looking to keep the rink alive and people who use other rinks in the area worried they'll need to squeeze more groups into their ice time. Council is looking at multiple options here. That includes building a new curling club, renovating the old one, the existing one, and moving the club to the WFCU Centre. Staff is recommending Council go with that third option. They point to a 2019 master plan that suggests there is enough rink time, but users say there would not be enough space to bring in the curling club. The total cost would be around $500,000 to do that. The other options could cost as much as $12 million. We'll follow this story as it develops on our website, and you can find more later on cbc.ca/Windsor. The federal government is launching a 3-year pilot project it says will help employers cut red tape when trying to hire migrant workers. The CBC Windsor's TJ Deer has more.
Ottawa says it will soon be easier for some businesses to hire people under the temporary foreign worker program.
This is something that is much needed. Again, something that can streamline the process, that can help take a little bit of the administrative burden off of the shoulders of growers, of farmers, but at the same time really maintain the integrity of the inspection regime and the protections in place that are looking after the health and safety of our workers as well.
The pilot project is for employers who have historically complied with employer requirements. This will help businesses that hire migrant workers, like DC Farms, who grow eggplants and tomatoes. 12 migrant workers are currently employed here. The farm's operator says if they didn't have access to the program, they would struggle to stay afloat.
In the past, where there's been times where we've been down, we've hired local individuals, and sometimes it works, but it poses a challenge.
Kazmierczak said between April of last year and March of this year, the Federal Employment Ministry inspected more than 2,100 workplaces across Canada. 116 of them were found to be out of compliance with employer guidelines in the program. 94 of them were fined a collective $1.5 million. 22 received official warnings, and 6 were banned from the program for 5 years. An immigration policy and labor expert says as far as red tape, the stats show that 98% of employer applications to hire migrant workers were approved last year.
The point is that there has been this movement, lobbying, very active lobbying, very visible lobbying from the business community to try and reduce the red tape, to make accessing these workers easier.
He says this is an example of the Liberal government making it easier for employers to access temporary foreign workers, noting the program started as a way to bring in agriculture workers, but has expanded to low-wage jobs.
Increases in temporary foreign workers within workplaces serves to lower wages for everybody within those workplaces, and has the potential, of course, to lead to spillovers in competing firms as well.
The program will roll out for employers like greenhouses and farms next month. Everyone else will have to wait till January. Kazmierczak says this is because the government expects a flood of applications, and the phased rollout will help them better manage them. TJ Deere, CBC News, Ruthven.
And most migrant workers in Windsor, Essex spend their days on farms, a job that can include a significant amount of time in extreme heat. Tonight, the province is pledging better protections for all employees when it comes to heat stress. Ali Chiasson takes us through the proposed new regulations and has reaction from industry.
It's so great to be here.
As the Ontario Labour Minister, improving worker conditions is a big part of Minister Monty McNaughton's gig.
Health and safety, it's their number one priority.
And working outside in the summer heat is a big part of the gig for many labourers.
I have to applaud them for taking this important step.
Professor Glenn Kenny runs Operation Heat Shield Canada, which studies the impact of heat and rising temperatures on workers.
Heat stress is a problem, not just during extreme heat. We have to remember that workers work under conditions that may be with highly insulative clothing that can really limit their ability to thermoregulate.
Hot and humid conditions can occur indoors too.
You can also have manufacturing where, again, perhaps while they may have some level of air conditioning, it's not always enough to ensure that the temperatures indoor remain sufficiently low that workers might not be negatively affected.
The new regulations would introduce heat stress exposure limits, new heat stress risk assessments, require employers to mitigate heat exposure, and establish workplace protocol, including recognizing the signs and symptoms of heat-related illness and protective measures.
When you're looking at what the government says they'll do, I want to know what it looks like when they enact it.
Change is needed, but it must not become just another poster on the wall at the office.
Where you see that the regulations exist, but the willingness of the ministry to actually enforce and uphold those regulations, that's what makes it beneficial to workers or not.
It's about enforcement, accountability.
Inspections, fines, enforcement, generally speaking, where we actually have also public awareness campaign that is around it so that workers actually know that this regulation change has come into effect.
And given the state of our warming climate.
The climate crisis is here, it's present with all of us. And if we don't actually get ahead of it, and if we don't actually hold employers accountable for adequate working conditions, then we are, really just checking a box without making anyone's working life any better.
The ministry's heat stress regulations is in the feasibility analysis phase, with more details expected in the coming months. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
We are about a year away from the Solid Waste Authority implementing an organic waste home collection program right here in Windsor, Essex. As Dale Molnar reports, there are still some logistics, though, to work out.
The Essex-Windsor Solid Waste Authority is provincially mandated to implement an organic waste collection program by August of next year. Councillor Kieran McKenzie sits on the Waste Authority board. He says they are still working on how the green bins for the collection will be distributed and how to encourage people to participate in the program.
We need to hit a diversion target of organic material of 70%. Over the time frame that by the time we get to 2030. We are going to potentially need to look at different ways, either incentivize or perhaps doing audits of people's refuse to make sure that that they're complying, because we legislatively have to hit those targets by the time we get to 2030. Hopefully it'll just be normalized.
The Waste Authority conducted a survey in which 75% of respondents said they would participate in a curbside green bin collection program. Some people we talked to agreed.
It's long overdue to have something organized. We previously lived in Nova Scotia, and they've been doing it 10, 15 years. They've had mandatory composting.
I've never done it. It's one of those things I've always wished that I did do. Wish I took more time to be that person. My sister-in-law does it religiously, and I think it's great.
The Seacliff Energy Corporation in Leamington will begin accepting the waste in spring of 2025. It was the earliest they would be able to implement the contract, which the Solid Waste Authority has entered into with the company. The contract is for the company to accept up to 10,000 metric tons of waste per year for 5 years, with an option for 3 more. The cost to taxpayers will range from a maximum of $1.35 million in the first year to $1.72 million in the last year. But the CEO of the parent company says they can convert the waste into heat for greenhouses and electricity for our homes.
So we produce electricity, renewable thermal energy, and the third product is a fertilizer.
Mackenzie says the organic waste will likely be composted between August of next year and spring of 2025 when Seacliff Energy begins accepting the waste. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
A group of Canadian news outlets, including the CBC, has filed a complaint about Meta with the federal competition watchdog. The company is blocking news content on its platforms here, and the move is in response to the new Online News Act that requires tech giants pay news media for reposting their content. CBC's Marina von Stackelberg has more.
Meta is now blocking Canadians from seeing news stories on their Facebook and Instagram feeds. A coalition of broadcasters and print publishers says that's uncompetitive. They want Canada's Competition Bureau to investigate.
It's an abuse of their dominant position. Essentially what they've done is they are denying news publishers and broadcasters audience in Canada, but moreover, because of that, they're also denying us advertising revenue at the same time.
The group says Meta and Google make 80% of all digital advertising revenue in the country. Meta has called the new law unworkable. The only way we can reasonably comply with this legislation is to end news availability for people in Canada. But the federal government says a 6-month regulatory process is underway, and Meta doesn't have any obligations yet under the new law.
We're engaged in that process. Google's engaged in that process. And what we would say to Meta is pick up a pen and get engaged. There's plenty of time to make sure that your input is in the regulations, so get in the game.
The Competition Bureau says it has been monitoring Meta's actions. The federal regulator says it's gathering information about whether the company is violating the Competition Act. In a written response, a spokesperson says, as the Bureau's preliminary review is ongoing and there is no conclusion of wrongdoing at this time, it would be inappropriate to speculate as to potential outcomes, timing, or appropriate next steps. Experts say the Competition Bureau could force Meta to comply with the law.
I think for Meta, it's really critical for them currently to hold their position, because they know that Canada can set an important precedent internationally in terms of, the role of local news organizations, national news organizations.
Competition bureaus in other countries have levied significant penalties to tech giants before. France fined Google €500 million in 2021 for failing to negotiate with news organizations there in good faith. But exactly what Canada's Competition Bureau will do or when it will act remains unclear. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Still to come, a chance for rain on the way. How much? We'll have all of your weather details coming up next. We've done countless stories about people's love of birds in our area, and that passion sure was on display on Pelee Island this weekend, working to help rescue a pelican. Have a look at the scene here. That pelican in the middle was found entangled in a fishing line. Larry Bailey, the man in the boat, called up a few people he knew to help him rescue the bird. One of them is a field supervisor at the Pelee Island Bird Observatory. They were able to snip the fishing line off the bird's leg and wings. Then they put the bird on the ferry, bringing it back to the mainland and over to Wings Rehabilitation Center in Amherstburg. The pelican has puncture wounds all over his body with hooks in his beak. It's not certain how the bird will recover. They're still waiting for the swelling to go down to get a better sense of the injuries. Time now for a local look at our weather forecast. For that, let's head to Ethan Williams.
Well, Jason, a bit of a soggy end to the long weekend in our area, picking up around about 15 millimeters or so, much of that kind of in the last 24 to 48 hours. But just to the east of Windsor, amounts close to 30 millimeters along Lake St. Clair. But you have to go eastward into the Ottawa Valley, really is where they had the heavy rain, 90 millimeters at Merrickville, just south of Ottawa. Bit breezy on the backside of this system. We did see some gusts kind of in the 30 to 40 range for a lot of our area this afternoon, even gustier toward the GTA. Temperature-wise, we were sitting pretty nice today, mid-20s for a lot of us. Humidex values kind of getting close to the 30 mark, and then kind of north and east of there where we saw that cloud cover and still a little bit of rain, those Humidex values were definitely pulled back a bit. Now, as for tonight, could see some increasing cloudiness with some spotty showers and thunderstorms this evening. That should end as we head through the overnight hours, but tomorrow there is another chance that we could see some pop-up showers and storms again. Likely non-severe. The threat tomorrow, only a level 1 out of 4 from Environment Canada for severe storms in our neck of the woods. But this cold front moving through early Thursday, likely to bring the next best chance of rain to us. And even at that, it's likely not going to be measurable rain, maybe only a millimeter or two. Heavier amounts going to be falling to our north and east. In terms of winds, staying a bit on the breezy side this next couple of days. Generally coming from the southwest, and we're looking for gusts kind of in that 30 to 40 range at times, but overall not too bad. In terms of our next 7 days, looking at some stormy conditions again on Thursday with that line moving through, but then some clearing for Friday, muggy for Saturday with the possibility of some showers and storms, and showers likely continuing through the weekend and into next week before we get some clearing heading into Tuesday. So showery and kind of unsettled here, Jason, but our temperatures staying at or above seasonal values as we head through the rest of this week.
And still to come here on CBC Windsor News at 6, why some local groups say it's important to keep conversations about woke and anti-woke out in the open. That story is next. It's a word that's getting plenty of play in the United States election cycle this time around, woke. Here in Windsor, groups gathered at the Sandwich First Baptist Church talking about what it means to be woke. The panel was led by Leslie McCurdy. Here's her definition of the word as she predicts the term will make a comeback.
It's been a lot in the news lately about woke, anti-woke, critical race theory and all of these things without people really knowing exactly what they mean. So we thought we'd at least bring a definition of that to the community and then discuss about how those things impact upon the community. As a part of the discussion, it was basically relayed that woke means being aware of things, being informed, knowing your history, knowing the way social structures impose upon the Black community. And at this time, it seems like the Black community is becoming more woke. There's a push against that. I mean, during the time of enslavement, an educated slave was considered a dangerous slave because you disrupt the economics. So, I mean, that was part of the discussion today about how maybe we are making some progress in the community, and that is why there is such a backlash to that and the whole discounting of being woke, i.e. the discounting of being intelligent and informed. And if you just boil it down, I mean, all of them were talking about how history is important, how knowledge is important, how wisdom is important, about how knowing how the structures in our society impose upon all of us, about how racism is cultural, how our society is built upon, you know, the stealing of the land from a people and the forced labor of others to, quote unquote, develop it. So all of these things are very important to know so that we can understand how our economic and political and social structures still try to maintain that, and so that we can work to change it for the benefit of everybody. If we don't keep talking about it, it gets brushed aside, it gets subverted in some way, and I think that is part of the purpose of the whole anti-woke movement is to keep change from occurring. And again, I would say, and this is my personal opinion, that has more to do with the economics than anything else, because even racism was developed to justify slavery, which is an economic institution. And that's the woke part, I think, that people need to realize.
In a little more than a year, astronauts will be heading for the moon for the first time in more than 50 years. The 4 crew members, including one Canadian, just got their first look at the Artemis II spacecraft that will carry them there. The CBC's Sarah Levitt tells us about the anticipation that's building.
Boy, it's harder than I thought.
Turns out orbiting the moon is no walk in the park. The 4-person crew of Artemis II got to see the vessel that'll get them there for the very first time.
Seeing the capsule for all of us sent shivers down our spines.
This is another major step of us going back to the moon.
The mission, a 10-day lunar flyby ahead of Artemis III, whose crew will land on the moon. First, though, they have to check it out, and on board is a Canadian.
You should have seen the reaction when Reid brought the crew to Ottawa, and they were in front of the Parliament.
Jeremy Hansen from London, Ontario, and he says the lead up to the launch is more important than anything.
The success is in the learning that's happening like right now. Like learning is happening right while we're sitting here, and stuff that is going to serve us on our ultimate objective.
The mission will be the first since the end of the Apollo program in 1972. It's something that has many Canadians more excited than ever.
I've just shooken the hand of like somebody who's going to go around the moon.
Space educator and amateur astronomer Trevor Turleen got to meet some of the crew, something he won't soon forget.
Nobody under the age of 50 has ever looked up at the moon while somebody has either walked or orbited around the moon. And I think you look at the moon differently when you know there's another human being around it.
We're fired up.
Says Reid Wiseman, Artemis II's commander, fired up for the planned liftoff in November 2024. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
Guard dogs sometimes have a reputation for being intimidating, even vicious, but a pup in California is not one of those dogs.
Because you're so cool. Come here. Because you're the coolest dog I've ever known. I love you too.
A suspected bicycle thief in San Diego also stole the heart of this friendly golden retriever. The pooch wandered in just as the person was about to make off with one of several bikes left in an open garage. The dog did manage to slow down the process by demanding belly rubs and a lot of attention, but the alleged thief eventually walked away with that bike and is still at large. San Diego police released the surveillance video earlier this month, and the incident happened in mid-July. Well, that's it for us here at CBC Windsor News Live at 6. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget, for news anytime, head to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor, and be sure to download the free CBC News app. Thanks again for watching. Have a great night.